Okay,
Good morning.
Franklin County Board of County Commission now back in session. Next on the agenda will be Miss Amy Kelly, Board of Adjustment report.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This morning, we have a consideration of a request to construct an addition 5 feet into the east side setback on property described as 4402 St. Teresa Avenue, St. Teresa, Franklin County, Florida. Request submitted by Jay McDaniel, agent for Jerry and Nora McDaniel, applicant. The Board of Adjustment recommended approval by unanimous vote. I can show you some images. It's a narrow lot, and there's an existing, he does have 2 letters of support from the adjacent property owners that do not mind him going 5 feet into the side setback. Oops, I'm sorry.
Pleasure of the board on this.
So moved for approval.
Second.
I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Burt, second by Commissioner Jones. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
Okay. We'll move to the planning and zoning recommendation report. We had a commercial site plan application. It's for the Paul Parker, but since that item has been removed from the agenda, we left it there for informational purposes, just to let the public know this has been withdrawn, and we won't be dealing with it today.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead.
can I make a comment?
Yes, you can.
You know, obviously, I represent the district in which this rezoning proposal was suggested. And representing the folks, I had a huge amount of email comments about the rezoning of this very sensitive piece of property. You know, most of us are very privileged in life to meet just a few people who kind of lift our spirits and kind of culture our imagination and give us some inspiration on just how we live life. And I was very impressed with the process that Mr. Parker and his representative went through in considering the rezoning of this property. It was well done, well illustrated, well thought out, and went through our system and process. And I just wanted to compliment all of those parties. I wanted to compliment the energy that had been expressed by the folks at Alligator Point, and just to let you know that it made a soft landing. And it was, although it was one of the most controversial pieces of consideration that I've had in my tenure, the process went, I think, very well, and I think all in the level of not only the folks at Alligator Point, but here in our staff in the county are to be complimented on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item, we have a critical shoreline applications. We have a consideration of a request to construct a multifamily dock located at 2832 US Highway 98 East, St. James, Franklin County, Florida. The dock will be 150 foot long by 4 foot with an 8 by 16 kayak launch and an 8 by 12 terminal platform. This application has all state and federal permits. Request submitted by Larry Joe Colson, agent for St. James PUD. Applicant, the Planning and Zoning Commission, they approved it unanimously, or recommended approval unanimously.
Pleasure of the board.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Masters, second by Tua, Commissioner Byrd and Commissioner Parrish. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
Okay, number 12 is another critical shoreline application. Consideration of a request to modify an existing dock by adding a 4 by 18 finger pier and a 12 by 20 covered boat lift on property described as Lot 4, Block 76, Unit 5, 363 Cook Street, St. George Island, Franklin County, Florida. This item has a state permit and will be contingent upon the federal permits. Request submitted by Garlic Environmental Associates, agent for James Slackey and Andrew Grogan. The Planning and Zoning had a unanimous vote to approve, or recommend to approve.
Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve. Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jones, second by Commissioner Massey. All in
Mr.
favor?
Chairman, can I
Aye.
ask a question? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Amy, this is not going to have a problem with the canal, is it?
They're not going any farther past the existing dock. The original application that they submitted showed it extending out farther into the canal.
Right.
But since this is the original the existing, and
Right,
it's like a V-shaped
right.
right here. They're adding a 4x18 pier that's it'll look like this. So they're not extending any farther out than what was originally there.
Okay, that's what I seen, but just to clarify for the record, I wanted to ask the question.
They had submitted a different plan previously,
Mhm.
but DEP did not approve it because it extended farther out, so they
Right.
approved it further east.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
Okay. We have another dock. It's a consideration of a request to construct a single-family private dock on property described as Lot 34, Alligator Point subdivision, 1617 Alligator Drive, Alligator Point, Franklin County, Florida. The dock will be 359 feet by 4 foot wide and have two 12 by 20 boat lifts and a covered 10 by 16 terminal platform. This application will be contingent upon state and federal permits. Request submitted by Garlic Environmental Associates, agent for Jim Sweat, applicant. The house has been permitted on the property, and they voted in recommendation to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Burt, second by Commissioner Massa and Jones. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
Okay, we have a final plat application. It's a consideration of a request for final plat approval of a 5-unit subdivision named Black Bear Bayou 2, a replat of lots 1 and 7 of Black Bear Bayou, lying in Section 8, Township 7 South, Range 4 West, Carabel, Franklin County, Florida. Request submitted by Thurman Roddenberry and Associates, agent for John Johnson, applicant. Planning and Zoning had a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Massa, second by Commissioner Jones. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
Okay, the last item on the Planning and Zoning report is a land use rezoning application. It's a consideration of a request for a public hearing for a land use change of 5.88 acre parcel from residential to commercial and a rezoning from R1 single-family residential to C4 mixed-use residential on property lying in Section 7, Township 7 South, Range 3 West, 2619 US Highway 98 East, Lanark, Franklin County, Florida. Request submitted by Clayton Studsdale, the Studsdale Law Firm, PLLC, agent for Timothy Saunders and Christina Saunders. They're the applicants. Planning and Zoning had a motion to deny that it died for a lack of a second. They had a second motion to approve, died for a lack of a second. Planning and Zoning had no recommendation from their board.
Pleasure to vote.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask a question.
Go ahead.
I mean, you were at the P and Z meeting, did they discuss comp plan or any other county documents and this go into a public hearing, or what was actually discussed?
We discussed the adjacent property, what they were zoned.
Mhm.
We discussed the land use. We discussed the zoning and the adjacent properties.
Okay.
We did talk about some flood issues. We talked about some traffic issues. But as far as diving into the comp plan, I did not.
Okay.
We got to give them a public hearing.
Yep. I agree.
I mean, that's what we do. We got to give them that.
And Mr. Chairman,
Mhm.
Ms. Amy, could your staff give us an analysis of the comprehensive plan relative to this piece of property and how it looks in the overall picture in that area? Just give us the big picture,
Okay, at the public hearing?
please,
Okay.
at some point, just so we have that information.
Yes, sir. I sure will.
And if it's appropriate, you can email it to us prior to the public hearing so we can study it. Does it complement the comprehensive plan or not? And what's the vision for the future in that area?
Pleasure to vote.
So moved for public hearing.
Yep.
Second.
I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Masters, second by Commissioner Jones to take it to a public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, just so the public knows, this is a special time for everybody there at Gulf Terrace and at Lanark Village and surrounding area to really start developing your facts, your figures, and flood us with that information. We're looking forward to the public hearing. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could address Commissioner Bolt's question to staff. When we go to the public hearing, Commissioner Bolt, I will, in conjunction with your planning director, Mr. Mark Carrington, we will prepare a presentation. There's typically nothing that your staff would produce in advance that is a written report, but I will be more than happy, and we'll call each one of the commissioners in advance of the public hearing so that you have a report from me to you in advance of the hearing. But typically we don't have, I mean, it's not like a true court case where we file memorandums with the judge in advance and send copies to the other side. I mean, it's a quasi-judicial hearing. It's not a judicial hearing. But if you should have any questions in advance of my communication with the board, then feel free to call me, Commissioner Bolt, because I'm sure you're probably getting probably more questions than others because it is in your district. So I'll be glad to be helpful for you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we had a public hearing scheduled for Paul Parker's request, but it has been withdrawn. And that concludes my reports.
Okay, anybody got anything else for Miss Amy?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Amy, just to clarify, now at 11, we're still gonna have a public hearing, correct?
Yes, for the St. George Island overlay, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, so the first of two hearings on the St. George Island overlay is scheduled for 11, Commissioner Jones, and we cannot start that any sooner than.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
But Alan seems eager to go, so.
He's not next, the clerk is.
Okay,
Thank you.
next
Have a
on the
good day.
agenda will be Clerk of the Court, Ms. Marcia Johnson.
Gentlemen, I don't have a report today. I do want to thank you all for how well you work with my office and coordinating there and the finance stuff. And I'm just glad that we have a great relationship, my office and the board. I thank y'all and hope y'all have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas to
You
you
too.
and your
Thank you.
staff, your office. On the board. Okay, next on the agenda will be the Restore Coordinator, Mr. Allen Pierce.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to hand out, everything on your agenda packet is accurate, except I had a long addendum item, and I'm going to hand it to you so you all can see, follow along with me. This is based upon a meeting that Commissioner Bolt and I had yesterday afternoon at 3 p.m. with Representative Shove and a number of other people, so I just want to, you see where the star is, that's where I'm going to divert from your agenda packet.
Thank you.
But right now, we'll do the agenda package. So starting on item number 19, Alligator Drive rebuilding update. Clay County and I met with the FEMA inspectors, and Commissioner Bolt, one of the FEMA inspectors, was that J-man who was at the meeting yesterday.
Behind us, yeah, okay.
FEMA was on Alligator appointed December 4th to explain the reconstruction project to a new set of inspectors, one of which was Jay, who said he would be writing up the FEMA assessment. The good news is they did not have any issue with the design we'd already bid out, although it's going to be changing in just a few minutes when I tell you something. The only bad news is they could not give me a concrete time when FEMA funds will be obligated. The inspectors did have a December 12th date to get the work done, so there appears to be some internal deadlines that someone in FEMA is now setting. Based upon what I understand remains to be done in the FEMA system, I do believe it is realistic to think Anderson Columbia could begin work by March 1st. So I'm still going to hold to March 1st, even though we had a little hiccup yesterday afternoon. All right, so that's sort of general knowledge. So number 20, though, is where I will divert from the agenda package and go to my written notes here. All right, Representative Stone had scheduled a meeting for FDOT, Federal Highway Administration, and FEMA staff to discuss the ownership of Alligator Drive. Commissioner Bolt, and I'm going to say this now, did attend the meeting, and we did try to promote the idea of state taking over the road. So starting on my addendum there, and in parentheses, I'll start reading from there. The meeting happened yesterday at 3 p.m. at December 16th at Representative Sho's office in Tallahassee. Commissioner Bolt and I represented Franklin County. At least 15 other people were there representing FDOT, FDEM, and FEMA. The three highlights of the meeting that I took, and Commissioner Bolt can certainly add on if he thinks I've missed some things out, is A, FDOT will not take over Alligator Drive as it does not meet the needs of the state. The best thing that will happen is that FDOT will research the opportunity for the state to say Alligator Drive meets the definition of a federal highway safety, FHSA, as an evacuation route. And if that happens, then Alligator Drive would become eligible for FHSA funds after disaster. It would seem on the surface that Alligator Drive would meet the definition of an evacuation route, as it is the only access point for the only access road for the point. But FDOT point out there are specific FSHA definitions of what an evacuation route is, and FHSA has to agree to that application. So FDOT is gonna report back to Representative Schoaf on the matter. This one was battle between the state and the feds, you know? Everybody's saying, oh, it's your problem, and we're in the middle of it. We don't have any, you know, really outcome on that thing, so we'll see what happens on that.
And, Mr. Chairman, you know how that all came about? So we're sitting in this room yesterday afternoon around 3:30, assembled in that room. I'll bet that room wasn't more than 500 square feet in size with a huge conference table. There's Representative Schoaf at the head of the table. About 19 people were there representing these different state agencies. And specifically, once and for all, on behalf of the county and on behalf of Alligator Point, I asked, State, will you take that road back? We have been good stewards of that road for 30 years. Alan passionately talked about the millions of dollars we've spent on that road, and we talked about all of the issues related to that road: life, health, safety, all the transportation issues. And basically, that meeting, in my opinion, was so important that the Secretary of the Department of Transportation was there. He came.
But the district secretary,
Yes, that guy.
yeah, it's a
From,
much bigger secretary that we'll
right.
never see.
Yeah. But that level was there, and the interest was there. And essentially, the road does not qualify for a main artery that the state would use. It's basically a small collector road of some type. And they don't have the legal precedent to take that road back. They were made to take a road back somewhere in Florida by the legislature.
Well, Gulf County,
Yes,
The
and I think they resented that.
they did.
They really did. But, you know, when we asked the question also about, is there any road like this in Florida at all? And nobody in that room could find a road or think of a road that is worse than the one we have right here. But that, I think, is what brought about the possibility that Alligator Drive might become designated, if it meets the criteria, as a federal disaster evacuation road, and might have privileges for more money for its protection as well as its support.
I mean, it might.
Yeah.
Again, Commissioner Boyle, I appreciate your enthusiasm. I can see the Federal Highway Administration people saying in Washington, over my dead body.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say it publicly, but,
yeah.
this is a very expensive road, and everybody who's been down there sees that, and
Yeah.
nobody wants to stick their finger in it.
Yeah, but now we know for the first time,
Yeah.
I think. And I just want you guys to know that. And then we have some, I think, some potential for the future now.
That was good to get that resolved. All right, item
it
B.
was.
FEMA staff was asked on the status of the project worksheet for the $4.7 million of reconstruction costs. And this was a big surprise of the meeting was. We were all informed that FEMA had initially found some $1 million of construction costs that they thought would not be reimbursable. Again, we didn't know that until 3:45 yesterday afternoon, and we were sort of stunned.
Yes.
Those costs relate to the stormwater treatment system for the road that was not in place before the storm. FEMA staff said their responsibility is to build the road back to pre-storm conditions, and if there was not a stormwater system in place before the storm, then someone else should pay the cost of that improvement. The county and FDEM both said the stormwater was a requirement of FDEP and had to be installed. FEMA staff then agreed that if the stormwater system was a requirement, then it would be eligible for FEMA reimbursement. So FEMA staff, Dewberry, and FDM staff are going to go over the stormwater system and requirements and get that issue resolved. And so I talked to Clay yesterday, and that's Jay character we mentioned. He's supposed to send the questions he has on the cost components, and we'll all get together and try to resolve. It was pretty apparent to me the state of Florida was on our side on that issue.
Yes, it was, yeah.
So I think that will get resolved, but it's just frustrating. I say this to you all, Commissioner Bolt, you experienced it. You know, out of the blue, we get this
Yeah.
hiccup, $1 million hiccup in a $4.7 million project we knew nothing about. That's the kind of frustration that just happens over and over again in these big systems.
And no telling, if we hadn't had that meeting yesterday, we would have ever heard about this. You know, it was so
Casual.
vague how
Yeah.
he mentioned it, even when he said it, you know?
Yeah.
So I think we missed a bullet.
Yeah, I think we did too. Okay, item C. Representative Schoaf strongly encouraged the county to expedite additional road protection. So this $4.7 million of road reconstruction is not damaged as it is so close to the Gulf of Mexico. Let me just say parenthetically, Commissioner Boyle, I'm going to add in here. So to give you an idea of scale, the county's total road department budget is $1.6 million. That's the total budget for everything the county does related to roads in the county. It includes the personnel, includes equipment costs, it includes the material we buy, $1.6 million. This 2,000 feet of road is estimated to cost $4.7 million. So in this 2,000 feet of road, we would spend 3 times the county budget over the entire year trying to build this, so this is our responsibility. That's why we have to work with FEMA, we have to work within the system we have, because otherwise the cost would bankrupt this county. So I just say that parenthetically. To that end, all right, so Representative Schoaf says, look, $4.7 million is a big cost. I don't want to be supporting this thing if you all are going to do some extra work to protect that road because the ocean's right there. And he asked me several times, well, isn't there, what's going to happen when the next storm comes? And I've said this to you all, and I'll say it again. The road could easily wash out at either end because FEMA can only spend money on the section of the road that got damaged. They can't spend money on sections of the road that are going to be damaged. That's someone else's problem, FEMA says. Well, the solution to that is put a beach out there. I mean, I say that, and I'm going to read it again. The reason that is the state of Florida funds beach renourishment. We have a partner in protecting that road. That's the only mechanism that's available for additional protection out there, for which there is a partner. We can do lots of things on our own if we want to, but if we do it on our own, we bear the entire cost. And that, when we're talking about millions of dollars, ladies and gentlemen, it's not prudent for the county to bear millions of dollars of cost when there's another program out there where we can share the cost. I mean, the dollars are involved here. It drives us to beach renourishment. Anyway, so Representative Schoaf encouraged that we do something else to protect the road. To that end, I have contacted Dewberry and MRD Associates to see if the county's current $200,000 beach renourishment design request to DEP can be expanded to include design and $5 million of construction funds in 2020. And again, I'll say parenthetically, if we get $5 million of DEP, then we'll use $5 million to restore. We'll have $10 million of beach restoration construction money. So it's a match, $5 million from the state, $5 million from the county for a $10 million project out there.
How much do it cost?
Well, we hope $10 million. I will say that, I've been and there's been some criticism of me and of the county, we haven't worked more aggressively on restore projects. Well, commissioners, this restore is a one-time pot of money that we have to use very carefully because unless we have a terrible disaster, another disaster like BP oil spill, we're not going to get $18 million given to us ever again without, it's just not going to happen. And so we've been slow to review projects and to make sure that these are well spent. I will tell you that if we hadn't had restore money and we still had to do beach renourishment, then that $5 million would either come out of an additional assessment on the property owners of Alligator Point, or I don't know where it would have come from. But I mean, this $5 million of restore money is critical to keeping the costs down for the people of Alligator Point. I mean, I hope they realize that this is a cost sharing that we didn't have the last time we talked about beach renourishment. The last time we did beach renourishment, the residents of Alligator Point paid the entire cost, and it was the assessments were going to be much higher than they would be this time, because we are absorbing the construction costs on this project, and we're not passing those costs on to anybody else. Anyway, so if we can get $5 million of construction costs in 2020, then we will try and move forward in 2020, and I apologize, I got off track here.
Ever since you've been in there, Alan, fighting that road, you probably put $15 or $20 million in that road, hadn't you?
Well, I know I can document $8 million worth. I can
$8
tell you
million?
that. Yeah, because I gave that handout yesterday, about $8 million so far. There may be more, Commissioner, but yes. So let me just get back on track for a second here. So normally DEP authorizes design funds, and then the following year would be construction funds. So if we only got design funds in 2020, it would be 2021 before we got construction. That's a risk to the road. Representative Schoaf doesn't want us to have that risk. So FDEP will support the inclusion of construction funds, and if Representative Schoaf is successful in getting legislative funds for the DEP beach renourishment program, so that Franklin County is included, then beach renourishment to protect this 1 mile segment of Alligator Drive could occur shortly after road construction is completed. It is possible then that it would only be the 2020 hurricane season where the road would not be fully protected. If FDEP does not fund construction funds this year, the road will be exposed to the Gulf of Mexico during the 2020 and 2021, I have too many numbers there, 2021 hurricane season. If FDEP does support construction funds this year, then the county will need to move expeditiously on the creation of the MSTU so that there's a source of funds to maintain the beach. And I'm going to get to that in a second. There are other untested designs ideas that could be used in lieu of beach protection, but none of them have the matching funds available for construction that the state provides for beach renourishment. Every structure to hold back the Gulf of Mexico is going to cost millions of dollars. So if the county and the residents of Alligator Point want to minimize their costs, and again we are talking about millions of dollars, then the most cost-effective road protection that can be built is a beach renourishment project that can receive a 50% cost share with the state of Florida. So I just have to reiterate that we are trying to minimize the cost to the people on Alligator Point and the resident and the people in this county by sharing with the state of Florida. There are other designs out there, breakwaters, ditches, trenches, whatever you want to call it, concrete barriers in the ocean. None of those have a cost share. All those costs and their design risk will all be borne by this county. So if you want to protect the road, the most reliable way, you use the programs that are available, and that's beach renourishment.
Yeah, I want everybody to hear that, that we are really here in the county trying to minimize the cost to the taxpayer by taking advantage of the state and federal resources that are available to us as a commission and a county.
Yeah, again, if this goes to, we get the DEP money, and then the board will support the Triumph money, not the Triumph, the Restore money, that's $10 million of construction costs that would not be passed on to the residents of Alligator Point or passed on to any other group of citizens. We'll be using funds that are available to us to minimize the cost of this project to protect the road. And I just can't stress, because there'll be criticism of the Beach Renourishment, Commissioner Bolton. The criticism is going to be that in order to maximize the $5 million of state revenue share, you have to have a parking lot for 100 cars and you have to have a bathroom. I'm not going to mislead anybody. Those are requirements to get the matching funds, because the state of Florida says these funds are being generated by tax dollars, and in order to have tax dollars, you have to have tourists. That's just the way the state operates.
But we focused that parking lot and bathroom into a concentrated area, and it really can be built as a good asset for the folks there at Alligator Point.
Because if it's done properly, then the residential complaints that we've endured for years and years and years down further on the point could be minimized, because those parking areas would all be consolidated back on this 100-car parking lot, and we wouldn't have to have cars scattered throughout the point. So I see it as a win-win for the point.
And don't we also get another benefit when we build beach nourishment to protect the road? That linear 1 mile of length also gives beach opportunity for that parking area.
Oh, yeah,
Right in
yeah,
front of
that's
it.
correct. They
It's
go
a
together.
double opportunity there. Yep.
And if you build a beach, then FEMA comes along, and if it gets damaged by a hurricane, guess what? That beach then becomes an eligible expense. Right now, it's not, because we don't have one out there, but if we
There you
build
go.
it, then there's funding available to help maintain it, if it's damaged by a hurricane. Okay, so that is the, that little parenthetical aside is what happened yesterday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Commissioner Bolt, you want to add anything else to the meeting, because then I'll go
No,
on.
I think we all chimed in on that, and I'm looking forward for the input from the folks from Alligator Point now that they've heard us. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you something. Wouldn't it be better to build a beach first?
Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, that's exactly what Representative Shove asked. He said, look, why aren't y'all doing this backwards? And the answer is, in a perfect world, yes, we are doing it back. If we had all the money available, we would put a beach in first. But the problem is we have FEMA, and the road needs to be built. The residents of Alligator Point have been screaming at everybody, and so since we don't know how long, basically I want to start road construction and hope the beach follows shortly after. Because the restoration project could take 6 months to, I don't know how long it's going to take to put the beach in there. But I have a road, I have a contractor, and I have plans, and I have hopefully FEMA approval to put that road in there. And so, yes, in a perfect world, we'd put the beach out there, we'd make sure it was stable, and then we would follow in with a road. But that could be 2 years, and it's your decision. You're responsible for the federal, for the public safety and welfare out there, but I think we need to get a road in there and get these people satisfied with a paved road, with the money that's available now, and come in with a beach. But I agree, in a perfect world, we'd put a beach in first, yes, sir.
You better get some prayer warriors.
Yeah. We have
Hope
a
it's not
year.
storm.
2020 could be, it's certainly the worst case scenario happened on poor Gulf County, because Gulf County did this. Gulf County started a beach renourishment project, assessed the people. Before they finished the beach, a hurricane came in and washed the sand away. So bad things do happen on these deals.
They didn't get no reimbursement.
And they didn't get any reimbursement because they didn't
Wasn't
get,
certified beach.
that's right, that's correct.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
But also, we're sitting here waiting on DEP to see if they're gonna fund the design money.
Yes, sir.
And then if they have money in the, beach renourishment program, and the whole time you're not gonna have a road, so.
Right.
Until you get construction funds and design funds from DEP to even design this beach you're talking about.
That's why we need to go ahead with the road.
Yeah,
because-
that's what I'm
yeah.
trying to reiterate and say that, we can't wait on the road for 2 or 3 years waiting on funding.
Right.
We are doing it kind of backwards, but
It's the way
we
it,
gotta follow procedure and protocol, and we don't know if they're gonna have money in the beach renourishment program, DEP, or not.
right.
We don't know.
Right. While FEMA could, and they said this, Commissioner Ball, I think you heard this, while FEMA could give us a time extension, they really want construction projects to be done within a 3-year period after a storm event. They want things to be built, they want to have their money spent, they want to move forward with projects. So FEMA was not, I won't say we weren't concerned, but they were not It wasn't an issue to them to go ahead and build the road without the beach. They were like, hey, the money's available. In fact, we were reminded that, well, Frank County, we gave you $2.6 million of Hurricane Hermine, and you didn't spend it. Are you gonna do this again? Are you gonna take another $3 million and not spend it while you wait for something else to happen? Well, of course, the reason we didn't build a road after Hermine was we didn't have the permit from the state of Florida. So it wasn't like we were holding the money. We didn't have the permit. Now we have a permit from the state of Florida. I don't want to, now I don't want to be responsible saying, okay, we're not going to use that permit until everything's in place. No, sometimes you got to take what you got and you got to go with it.
And you know, having that road there may give us a better strategy of what a really good beach protection nourishment program looks like, citing the road and
Well,
for whatever.
Yeah, probably, but the road's going back in the right of way, so we know where the road's going. Okay, let me go to another long discussion here, and I apologize. Some of this will be a little bit out of sync because I wrote it before the meeting. So the item number 3, board potential discussion of potential MSTU for Alligator Point Road project. In 2006, the board developed an MSTU for a 3-mile-long beach restoration project on Alligator Point by utilizing the services of Neighbors, Giblin, and Nickerson Law Firm and a planning group called GSG. We were advised, and I have got the original study here, Michael, so I've researched some of that stuff. We were advised that those two groups, who often work together, were the experts in developing MSTUs around the state. In consideration of a new MSTU, I've asked Mike Dombrowski from MRD to lead this effort because the protection of the road through the installation of the beach has not been completely designed. And therefore, I imagine there will be some interface between the team designing the beach project, being MRD, and the team developing the funding source, the maintenance of the project, being the law firm in GSG. MRD has provided me with a scope of work that utilizes Neighbors, Giblin Law Firm and GSG to develop the boundaries of MSTU and a preliminary millage rate. MRD has worked with both firms on MSTU project in the past, so this is a known working relationship. The proposed fee for all this is not to exceed $27,500. I'm not asking the board to enter into this contract at this time. I want Mr. Stewart to look at it, but I want to bring up the subject as it was discussed at the last board meeting. This proposed MSTU has 2 significant differences from the last one, the one that we did in 2006. An evaluation of the number of parcels involved and an evaluation of whether only one rate is appropriate. I have said publicly that this project is designed to protect approximately 1 mile of Alligator Drive, and thus would only one rate would be applied to all those who deem to benefit from the protection of the road. At a minimum, there might only be some 400 property owners west of the washout that would meet the legal requirement of needing the road protected. At a maximum, there might be as many as 1,400 parcels if all of Alligator Point and Ball Point met the legal requirements of benefiting from road protection. The argument for the larger boundary is that the current fire station and water district are both west of the washout. So everyone benefiting from those 2 services might have a legal connection to the protection of the road. This is a swing of some 1,000 parcels and would have a significant impact on a proposed rate. In the previous MSTU, there were 3 assessment rates, depending on a parcel's proximity to the beach. But now I'm proposing there be only 1 rate. The legal basis for utilizing 1 rate also needs to be researched, as it might be there still is a benefit to owners in the immediate area that cannot be discounted. And this is where I'm going to repeat myself, and I'll do it just to make sure I haven't left something out. Frank County is requesting $200,000 design funds from DEP. Our proposal has not yet been ranked, and of course the legislature hasn't met. If we get the design funds this year, then Mike Dombrowski, I recommend the board begin the process of developing an MSBU funding source for the protection of the beach. And I say that so we will know here, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks, whether we're going to get design and construction. Because if we get design and construction, we've got to move forward with an MSTU. I bring this up now so the board and the public are aware of still what needs to happen. I realize other funding mechanisms have been discussed, such as parking fees, and those certainly might contribute to the funding of this project, but I believe the creation of an MSTU is fundamental to the maintenance of the road protection. The MSTU is an assessment that we collect as part of a parcel's property taxes, and all other forms of funding are untested. So in order for us to know there's money available, you got to go with how we know what works, and that's an MSTU. So my conclusion is we don't need to act on the MSTU thing now. We need to see if we're going to get design and construction money, and if we are, in January, we'll start talking about the structure.
And that'll be money to keep it going, right?
Yes, sir. This is the risk. Even without a hurricane, that section of shoreline is critically eroding. It's highly eroding at a rate such that every 8 years you're going to put sand back there, and somebody has to pay for that sand back there. FEMA will not pay for normal erosion, Mr. Chairman. FEMA only pays in case of a storm. So if a normal erosion is going on, somebody's got to keep that sand in place. And I know it's crazy to say, we know the sand is sacrificial. We know that it's putting it out there to wash away, but it washes away instead of the road washing away. And that is the logic that I have to keep pounding on, that we know the beach is out there It's not permanent, but it's much better for the ocean to be beating on that beach than to be beating on that road.
Well, anytime we get a big storm, it's gonna wash out Alligator Pond and C-30 down there. It's gonna wash both of them out. So,
Well, in the case of using Tropical Storm Nestor as an example, so $35,000 worth of county money was spent to protect the road, and FEMA's not involved. That's $35,000 of your tax dollars that were washed away. So using Tropical Storm Nestor as an example, that road would have been secure without a beach renourishment had we had the FEMA project in there. That's why it's important to get the FEMA project in there. So minor storms, tropical storms, the road's going to be secure. A big hurricane, we need the beach. You know, just when that next one happens, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead.
make one comment out of it is another reason for the MSTU is if the whole beach was washed away in a storm event, FEMA's only gonna pay 50% to
Yes,
put it
that's
back.
correct,
So
that's
you
correct.
gotta have a mechanism to match those FEMA funds with 50% of the money to put the beach back. They're not, FEMA won't pay 100% because the beach washed away.
Right.
And that's very important, establishing this
Yeah.
MSTU is to have money available to match the FEMA funds to put the beach back to protect the road in the future.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, I would say the matching during a FEMA sometimes changes from 50% depending on the severity of the storm, but you're right, they never pay 100%. Yeah, that's correct.
For a beach.
For a beach, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
you know, what we built here this morning is what I see is a whole large picture now. There's so many different arrivals of new information on this project. Before, it was kind of spotty here and there, and we didn't have the big picture. Now we have many different sources for which we're beginning to make some very wholesome decisions. And I think we'll find our outcome and suggestions will be well taken. Thank you.
I'm going to go to the next item then, if it's okay with you all. And here I made an error in assigning somebody his responsibility, so I need to correct something here. Board action on Triumph funds. I attended a Triumph staff meeting on Friday, December 6th, to hear an update on the expenditure of funds throughout the Triumph area. The chairman of the Triumph board, Don Gates, was at the meeting and encouraged counties to continue to develop economic development projects. Chairman Gates said parenthetically at the meeting that he had a meeting with the governor, or the governor informed him that he, the governor, is directing some $25 million worth of interest from the unspent Triumph funds to be sent to not DEM, as I say here repetitively, but DEO, Department of Economic Opportunity, is getting the interest money, not DEM, and I learned that yesterday. So everywhere I say DEO, I'm a DEM in here, think Department of Economic Opportunity. So Triumph funds will be spent to the Department of Economic Opportunity to help those counties impacted by Hurricane Michael. Along with the funds, the Triumph staff sent over a list to DEO of projects they think should be funded, and one of those projects is the county's $1.1 million fuel farm and backup generator for the airport. As the board is aware, we have spent over 6 months working and reworking this generator project to get in line with Triumph guidelines. It is my opinion the county is better off having DEO fund the airport project because there will not be any job creation requirements or any clawback provisions. I then spoke with Representative Schoaf yesterday at this meeting, informed them of the funding opportunity to DEO, and asked them to promote it. And actually, it was Representative Schoaf said it was DEO, not DEM, so he's aware of where the money's going. So he will be looking at that and trying to track that to assist us. Representative Schoaf has submitted a bill to fund the county EOC, but if DEO gets enough funding, then I have reminded Representative Schoaf that we might be able to get DEO money for an EOC also, because DEO is getting $25 million, and I don't know who else has the needs that we have. I mean, we certainly have a great need for a new EOC. Yep. So I did put that plug in there also. And that is the end of my long.
Okay. Oh. Anybody got anything for Mr. Pierce?
Mr. Chairman, somewhere in there is Santa Claus, but I'm not quite sure where.
Well, Merry Christmas to you, and
Okay, thank you.
Merry Christmas.
see you next year. All right, next on the agenda will be, let's see where we at. Mr. Michael Marone, County Coordinator.
All right, Commissioners, good morning. On the agenda is item number 23, the first item of my report. At your August 13th meeting, the board authorized an agreement with Pastor David Walker to serve as Weems Hospital Interim Chief Executive Officer for a period of 3 months, with an option to extend an additional 3 months on a month-to-month basis for a salary of $10,000 $416.67 per month. We are now into the second month of the month-to-month extension, so I'm recommending that the board renew the agreement with your interim CEO and guarantee 3 more months with another 3 month-to-month option. This will guarantee his position until March 17th. April, May, and June 2020 would be based on month-to-month basis. Board action to renew the agreement with Pastor David Walker as Williams CEO
Let me
from
ask you something.
December 17th to March 17th, 2020.
The man doing a good job. Instead of going back and forth, why we can't make that a year? Pledge of the board, dude. Just make it a year, because if you get to whatever decision they make on the hospital, somebody got to be there. So, oversee that. Other company gonna be in there, well, so I don't know, whatever.
We have good continuity of care when we keep David Walker on board. And consistency.
So,
I think we ought to consider that year extension.
pledge of the board.
Uh,
Me too. I mean, ain't no need to coming back and forth, running back and forth, running back and forth.
Well, I so move that we extend his contract for a year.
I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Burt.
I think maybe contingent upon making sure that Mr. Walker is okay with that future extension.
Commissioner, I did the 6 months, I did the 3 months with three. I was just basically renewing what we had done initially. Either which way, works for me.
Well, if you look at what I think is a harmonious function of the departments in that hospital, the people that I've talked to and everything, it just seems like there's a great deal of positive environment in that hospital in the last 4 or 5 months that I've noticed in a long time.
That's true, Commissioner.
I got a motion on, go ahead.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
What if we engage another entity to come in and manage the hospital, and we've got Pastor Walker on a 1-year basis, and then my question is, are they gonna wanna bring in their own CEO, and where does that put us as a board as if we renew this as a year?
That would have to be discussed with whatever.
Well, I mean, if you hire this man for a whole year though, and you get somebody that comes in and they either work with Mr. Walker, or we obligated to pay him for a year if the new management company wanted their own CEO.
Yes.
Well,
To answer your question, yes.
That's my dilemma and why I'm not seconding the motion. And it's nothing against Pastor Walker. It's just, where does that put us in the realm of if we decide to go with another person or another entity to manage the hospital, where does that put us? If we guaranteeing him a year and they bring in their own CEO, then we still owe him for a year when he possibly may not be the CEO. Then again, he may be, but then the new entity may want to negotiate their own salary
With
for
him.
Pastor Walker.
Yes.
So where does that put us? To me, it puts us in jeopardy because we're going beyond and we've not made a decision on the hospital yet.
Yes.
Now, if we were going to keep the hospital under county control like we've done for a number of years here lately, then that's fine. I don't have no problem with the job he's doing or anything else, but I'm looking at it from a different perspective. Is if somebody else come in to manage our hospital, and I know one entity says they're willing to work with him, the other entity probably isn't.
Yeah.
We haven't made that decision on which entity we're going with
Yeah.
out of the two people that want to actually come in and take over.
Didn't both entities say they would work with the people we had in place?
I don't know.
I can't remember that.
Let me just.
So I'm more in favor of going with what Mr. Marone's proposing until we figure out which direction we're going.
Yeah, David Walker, interim CEO. Whatever decision you all make is good with me. And just remember, you know, if you make 3 months, somebody come in 2 months, you don't have to pay me another month. You make a year, you don't have to pay me for a full year. You know, if the new company come in and say, hey, David Walker, we want to move in another direction, you know, let them move in another direction. You don't have to, it's not going to be a severance pay for David Walker. You know, we're not going to do that. We did it before in the county. I just think the money need to be in the hospital. And so that's just my philosophy. I may be wrong, man, but you know, that's just my philosophy. You know,
Would that
whatever we decide, that's what we decide.
With that being stated publicly,
Yeah.
I'll second Commissioner Bolt's motion.
Thank you.
I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Burke, second by Commissioner Parrish. Any more discussion? Go ahead.
If the board is finished discussing among itself, the way I would recommend that you resolve this particular issue, if you have a longer-term contract, is we simply have a termination for convenience provision stating in writing what Pastor Walker has said, which is no severance package. I can draft that up in the form of a letter agreement to make sure that it reflects the board's directions and Pastor Walker's comments here this morning.
Yes, sir. I agree.
You amend your motion?
Yep. I'll amend the motion.
I'm in a second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
And you
Next
know,
item-
what, let me
I'm sorry.
tell you, that was just a vote of confidence right there for our man, and we appreciate you, David.
Next item, Commissioners, item 24. Mr. Currington will receive a new SCOP agreement from DOT for repaving Timber Island Road from Highway 98 to Caribou River and building guardrails on Timber Island Bridge. The total contract for the surveying, design, permitting, and construction is $819,740. The work will have to be completed by June 2021. I just need action to approve the resolution that authorizes the chairman's signature on the SCOP agreement.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Massey, second by Commissioner Jones. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
Item 25, Commissioners, Mr. Currington was notified yesterday morning that the application cycle for FDOT's Small County Outreach Program, which is the SCOP program, Small County Road Assistance Program, which is known as SCRAP, and the County Incentive Grant Program, we call it SIGP, are now open. The application window for these grants closes on March 20th, 2020. Franklin County is eligible to apply for 3 SCOP projects, 2 SCRAP projects, and 1 SIGP project. The 2 cities are also eligible to submit possible SIGP projects to the Board of County Commissioners for the decision on which SIGP project to submit to FDOT for consideration. I ask that you contact Mr. Currington as soon as possible to discuss the specifics of these grants as it applies to possible projects in your district. So understand, City of Caribou and City of Apalachicola can apply for SIGP. They come in front of this board, and between the county SIGP and the 2 cities, you have to decide which one is most important, and that's the one you send to FDOT. Only one you can send to them.
Clay, could you come, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Clay, could you come forward, please, real quick? On this SIGP, is that the one that we can do sidewalks and different things with?
Clay Kennedy with Dewberry.
What are we doing up 65 now with sidewalk?
That doesn't ring a bell with me, Commissioner.
Okay.
I'm not saying it doesn't, I just have to go back and reread it.
What, do you know which grant program allows you to build sidewalks?
I think it's a lab, Clay?
Yeah, I don't, these,
City of Caribou project, actually, that we are administering for the city of Caribou, because we're lab certified, and they're not.
Yeah.
So it's left.
My question being is, I asked for sidewalks from, there.
Where it ends all the way down
across
to
from Napa, all the way out to
where
the
Burger King-
IGA and all
Yeah.
that. There's people walking on the sides of the road day and night.
Yeah.
Now, I've asked for us to apply for grant funds to extend that sidewalk out there, and nothing's happened.
We did, and they didn't fund it, so we can resend that to FDOT again.
but that shouldn't have been one of these 3 roads.
Okay,
that
all these
could
are
have been
road
a lot.
paving
Could be
projects.
safe schools, there's other DOT things that deal with sidewalks, multi-use paths.
Okay, that was just, that's the only question I had.
Yeah, that was submitted, though. I can't remember under what program we
Well,
did submit that.
we need to
Do you sound
resubmit.
like,
Okay.
ain't this sound like the evacuation routes and stuff?
The different ones they're talking about here, Michael, if I can interject, some of them are for resurfacing, some of them are for different things that they apply for. Some of them are for, I don't think any of them are for paving a road that is just a previously unimproved road.
That's the lowest priority. You can apply for that, but that's the lowest ranking, that's the lowest score you're getting on a project submitted. So in the region, if everything else is funded and they still have money left over, then they'll consider paving new roads. That's the lowest possible.
Would
Yeah,
you-
'cause
My question being though, there's a lot of roads in East Point that need to be resurfaced. And I'd like to see some of these funds spent over there,
Yeah.
in Commissioner Jones'
We've
district.
applied for
We've
them
talked-
3 years in a row.
I was gonna
and
tell you
turned
guys-
down every year.
We need to
Commissioner Jones.
reapply for 'em.
Yeah, Commissioner Jones is very familiar with that because we've
Yes.
reapplied, we've done plans, direction routes, and yeah.
But no, we definitely are.
Is
Yeah,
there some things we can direct, engineer of record to help us on this stuff?
I guess,
To
yeah,
Make
basically,
up better points for these?
yes, I was gonna say, Clay, we'll get with Mark and see how we can get better points to score higher as they review these projects.
Because there's a lot of roads in East Point that need to be resurfaced. I'd like to see some of these programs over there.
In the
to
entirety of the
help do
district.
that.
Which one was it that was, is actually caving in, and we've tried that a
Oh,
couple
that's
twice?
Hickory Dip Road.
Yeah, Hickory Dip,
The
tried
same
that
road that
too.
goes
I
to
mean,
the library.
that needs new
And there's
culverts
some
and everything.
right off of 98, there behind, behind the
Creamer
Mexican
Street.
restaurant and all
Creamer
that,
Street.
it's just falling in.
That whole, we tried a whole circle with them, thinking that if we went from 98 to
Okay,
98,
98
we would get
bypass.
more points. Blew us off.
Won't you get points for evacuation, right?
Yes.
Well, that'll be used there. I mean, some of them people have their evacuate open. Commissioner Jones?
Yeah, you're right. People live there.
Whether-
Just not a ton of people.
It don't
Make
matter.
a motion that we direct county staff and our engineer to work on that.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we get the engineer of record, work with Mr. Currington and some in the office to try to see what we can do to get some of these projects move forward and get the points necessary for approval.
Yes,
Got
sir.
a motion on the
Second.
floor by Commissioner Jones, second by Commissioner Parrish and Master. Any more discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
And before I move on, I'll say, any other projects that you guys have specifically for these grants, March 2020 comes quickly. There's a lot of background work, and Commissioner Jones will tell you again, a lot of background work that has to be done. So if you think of anything, let us know as soon as possible. All right, thank you all. Item 26, FWC grant for designing improvements to Old Ferry Dock boat ramp is set to expire December 31st. DEP has asked for a hydrographic analysis before they issue the permit for the boat ramp. This will take several months to accomplish, so Mr. Currington has asked FWC for a 6-month time extension. FWC approved the extension. I need board action to authorize the chairman's signature on the documents, which we should receive here within the next day or two.
Ready to vote?
So moved.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jones, second by Commissioner Master. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
27 is kind of a finally thing. The U.S. Corps of Engineers has sent the first time out letter and the initial preferred, as they call it, authorization for the Buddy Ward Memorial Artificial Reef Project. This project has been in the works since January of 2018, when Mr. Grayson Shepherd appeared before this board seeking approval to create the artificial reef. The first time out letter states that the Corps has completed the review and evaluation of the permit application and is requiring the applicant to review the terms and conditions prior to the Department of Army's final signature. There are special conditions that apply to these the special conditions that apply specifically to this project, along with instructions to accept or object to any of the permit terms and conditions. In order to proceed with this project, the chairman's signature is required on the permit, which will be submitted to the Department of Army for the final signature. Board action to authorize the chairman's signature on the permit and submit it to the Department of Army for their final signature.
I make a motion to approve based on, contingent upon the Attorney Schuler's review of these special conditions and requirements that are required of the county on this permit.
Okay.
I-
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Go ahead.
I reviewed the permit. From my perspective, I don't see anything that's legally objectionable to the conditions that have been imposed for the proposed permit. I did also recommend to Mr. Morone that he forward the permit both to at least Grayson Shepherd to review, and I forget if it was either Alan or Mark, probably it was Mr. Carrington, okay, both, for them to look at for the conditions of the permit in terms of a planning point of view, and also for Mr. Shepherd, he's going to be actually in the field conducting the surveys and the reviews. I was in Mr. Marone's office yesterday, and Mr. Shepherd reported back that he's not finding any problems with the conditions of the permit. He sees no reason basically to proceed. Those are my words, not necessarily his. And I believe there was no objection either from Mr. Carrington or Mr. Pierce from a planning viewpoint as to the conditions. So I would recommend going ahead and authorizing the chairman's signature on those bases with my recommendation, the joint recommendation I've just explained to you.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish, second by Commissioner Jones. Straight out motion now, right?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
Item 28, Commissioners, the county received notification from the Florida Department of Transportation that the county has been awarded the beautification grant in the amount of $97,385. At your July 16th meeting, the board authorized Mike and Pat O'Connell of the St. George Island Civic Club to team with Mr. Currington, your planner, to apply for this grant. Grant funding will be used to improve the landscape for the state-owned land between the exit of Brian Patton Bridge to Bayshore Drive. Mr. Davis, your Parks and Rec Director, has also been instrumental with this grant, as his department is going to maintain the landscape area. As with other FDOT grant projects, the county is responsible for the grant and will manage this project.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jones, second by Commissioner Parrish. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
That's a good thing, too. Good, Mike.
Item 29, at your last meeting, the board authorized the chairman's signature on a modification to worksite agreement, which allows for placement of career source workers within different county departments to assist with Hurricane Michael recovery. I indicated that the original agreement expired, so to continue the program, it was necessary to approve this agreement. What was unknown at the time, and is due to an oversight at Career Source, is that the agreement expired on September 30th, 2019. So the agreement requires a date prior to the expiration date, not the December 3rd meeting date when it was approved by this board. The modification extends the agreement to September 30th, 2020, unless available funding ends before that date. I need board action to authorize the September 30th, 2019 date as a date on the modification to worksite agreement. The chairman's signature was already authorized at your last meeting for the same agreement. It's just adding that back date to the agreement is what I'm asking the board to approve.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish, second by Commissioner Massey. Yeah, I talked to Ms. Kim, and she told me what's going on with it.
Good.
Mr. Chairman, so like the board's permission, I need to get with Mr. Morone on how to word the execution of that matter that he's just explained to you. There's a way it needs to be done in particular. I don't know that he's had to deal with this before.
Nope.
So if y'all don't mind, it's just for the record, I'll be working with him on that matter.
I'll amend my motion to direct the county attorney to work with Mr. Morone on that agreement.
Amendment second.
Okay, the first and second been amended, they'll be working with Mr. Schuler. He'll get with Michael on that. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
Number 30, at your December 3rd meeting, while informing the board of the first Census Complete Count Committee meeting, a small advertising and promotional budget was discussed. The Census Bureau states that each person counted brings at least $14,000 to the county. Therefore, each local government should contribute 50 cents per resident to the Census Committee to assist with awareness and other phases of the 2020 census. The Census Committee is in the awareness phase of the 2020 census and would like to order a couple of banners and a tablecloth that would be used during the county event to promote the 2020 census. Mr. Rick Watson, the tax collector and a member of the committee, will loan the committee a tent during these events. and I didn't state it here, but right now, those banners and tents only cost about roughly $500. So I didn't want you to think, anyway. With that in mind, I'm asking the board to consider a budget up to $4,500 for the Census Committee. I'm asking that so I don't have to we have to wait or keep coming back to you every single meeting if we want to purchase something. I should have been more clear there. In addition, the committee is still seeking representatives from the community, especially in the unincorporated Franklin County, to volunteer and assist with reaching those in their neighborhoods that may have questions or need guidance regarding the census.
Pleasure to vote.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Burke, second by Commissioner Jones. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
31, Commissioner, Sheriff Smith forwarded me an email sent to him that based on House Bill 441, each sheriff is to develop and file with FDLE an interlocal agreement, also known as a Public Safety Answering Points Agreement, by January 1, 2020. I'm going to quote from the email. The sheriff is required to engage all the stakeholders in her county to establish the protocols under which each PSAP can directly communicate with all first responder agencies. Since time is of the essence, would the board consider authorizing Attorney Schuler to work with the sheriff in creating this interlocal agreement and authorizing the chairman's signature on this agreement after the attorney has approved it? I think we basically do it. We need to put it in writing. That's what's going on right now.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish, second by Commissioner Jones. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
32 Commissioners, the sheriff in his quest to seek funding for the proposed county's drug rehab center is asking the board to authorize a letter of support for the project. The sheriff is seeking legislative funding for this project and would like to add a letter of support from the county to the application.
So
There's no
moved.
commitment about funding, there's no anything like that. He just wants it said that the county supports the project.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
On this particular issue, I don't have a problem issuing a letter of support, but I would like stated in this letter that we have allowed the sheriff to take over Bay City Work Camp as a place to house this, but the county is financially unable to support this project, but we do support the sheriff in his endeavors, but the county does not have the means to financially support it.
Okay.
But I do want them to know that we've allowed him to use that building, so that is our contribution towards this, but we are not financially able to help move this thing forward.
In any manner, no operations funding, nothing.
Correct.
I
want
got you,
that
sir.
Stated in the letter of support. I don't mind getting them a letter of support, but I want them to know that the county does not have the financial resources to
Commissioner
support
Bolt,
that.
do you so amend your
I
motion?
do, and that just adds for the reader to know the county really has got some skin in the game in an indirect way, and I like that too.
So with Commissioner Bolt amending his motion, I'll make the second on that with those stipulations.
I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Bolt, second by Commissioner Parrish. Another thing, it's gonna be for people, if it come through, it's gonna be for people anyway, come from everywhere, anywhere. So why we can't send this out to the surrounding counties and ask them to support letter too?
Oh, sure.
He may have, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I did not catch that.
I was asking, would it be okay to send out to the surrounding counties for a support letter from them too?
I don't see where that hurts, Mr. Chairman.
That's a good deal.
I'll recommend to him that he does, Commissioner, if that's what you'd like. I'll tell him with the letter of support and an email I sent him, I said, the board has recommended that you reach out to neighboring counties that might have people participating in this project to seek
He
funding.
said he's getting support from other counties, so it makes sense.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
33 Commissioners, the county received a letter from Attorney General Ashley Moody office stating that she has been appointed as chair of the statewide task force on opioid abuse by the governor, Governor DeSantis. As part of the task force role in developing a statewide strategy to address this crisis, the state is asking for your county's input. I quote, on what programs would most effectively abate the opioid crisis in your community. end quote. The state is trying to develop a strategy in advance of any settlement of ongoing negotiations with the opioid litigation. With that said, Attorney Moody is hosting a meeting on January 13th from 9 to 11 a.m. for an open table discussion to identify each community's input. There are space limitations, so they're asking that the county send only one representative to this meeting.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion that we send the sheriff to it.
That's right. Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner
discussion.
Parrish,
Have
second
discussion.
by Commissioner Bolt. Discussion.
I will say, in talking to the sheriff personally about this matter, he said that he would be glad to represent us on this issue, and I don't think anybody in our county would be better able to address the issue than him, since they deal with it every day.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
Item 34, Ms. Portia Sapp, Director of the Division of Aquaculture, has sent a package for a review for a new aquaculture use zone. After reviewing the package, the county has until January 11th, 2020, to comment on and/or to concur with or object to the proposed project. Your comments will be used in the department's evaluation of the proposed aquaculture use zone and activities. The department will consider the following preferences when issuing leases: applicants that are Franklin County residents, applicants that have attended a pre-application meeting which will be held here in Franklin County to provide an overview of the aquaculture leasing process and requirements, applicants that have not previously held a 10-year renewable aquaculture submerged land lease, applicants that have held a saltwater products license, known as the SPL, for at least 3 of the last 5 years, and applicants that have held a SPL with an oyster endorsement for at least 3 of the last 10 years. I sent a project to Mr. Josh Adams to verify that there are no conflicts with the Franklin 98 Living Shoreline Project. He verified that there were no conflicts. You may send your comments to myself or Ms. Sapp, and I put her email. So I think this is the Commissioner Parrish 4 mile project. I think it's what it's for. So, I mean, I knew that the ARPC project on the opposite side of the county, I got that, but I just like to get it in the record that it doesn't interfere with it. But I think
that
what's
is correct.
more important, Commissioners, is these requirements, these preferences that they're offering. That's what I really want you guys to review and make sure you're good with them, because that'll determine the pecking order in how people get these, because they're gonna be flooded with applications. So they're gonna apply these preferences to them that kind of sorts out, who gets what, who gets to the top of the list. So any
Yeah, but-
issues you have with those preferences, let me know as soon as you can.
They got a lot of people who oystered and they ain't get no license for the last 2-3 years because there wasn't nothing out there.
Yeah, I think that's why they put 3 for the last 5.
3 of the
So you
last
could have
5.
missed
3 for
2
the
out
last
of,
10, yeah.
Yeah,
something like that, yeah.
Okay.
But these are one of the, Mr. Chairman, these are one of the issues that we brought into a few meetings that we've had at the Armory with Ms. Portia about these leases and trying to get her to entertain preferences for Franklin County residents. Because we got people from Georgia and all over that's getting these leases, but Franklin County, we felt like the people that are now out of a job because of the state of the bay would have preference in applying for some of these leases. Trying to
Yeah,
get some of
but-
the local fishermen.
I know, but-
Be considered.
But the people from out of state ain't had no license period. That's what I'm
Right.
talking
You
about.
have Portuguese.
That's the only thing I was talking about.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's right, and these local preferences will help some of the local people get their name on the list and give them preference for these leases.
All right. At 35 and 36 are information. 35 is our Christmas week schedule. It's slightly different from the rest of the county because Gary, your building official and your inspector came to me and said it would be better for the contractors if we are open on Tuesday, Christmas Eve, and it's only myself and one of the permitting clerks will be here, to be able to get all their inspections that they would want. Gary's gonna work on Friday. We won't, but we'll switch Tuesday and Friday. Gary will work, your billing official will work on Friday to do those inspections. not to explain the whole project, but I mean, the entire procedure, but basically, if somebody calls in for inspection, it doesn't get done until the following day. So since he won't be doing any on Wednesday, which is Christmas Day, he's gonna be in on Friday. To get the inspections in the system on Friday, we need to work on Tuesday to get them from the contractors. I will advertise this and make sure that all our home builders, anybody has a project that's going on right now, know that we will be open on Tuesday to get their inspections. Receive and process, they'll be processed on Friday, okay? And 36, legislative day, we've already been notified, Ms. Grusan is waiting for you to give her a call up front to let her know what will be, who's going, if you'll need overnight stay, because some of the meetings are really early, parking is hard there in the morning, you guys know that, and so let her know as soon as possible, because it's not like there are plenty of rooms up there for that meeting, okay? And that's it for me, Commissioner.
I have something for you. The issue with the library over in East Point and Carabel with the new director,
Yes, sir?
can you explain that? What the emails and stuff? and
Well,
what-
I have, Commissioner. I've received a lot of, I've received emails from people I've never received emails from in reference to the director. I met with the director a couple of weeks ago. I've received emails since then, even after that point. Commissioner, I'm just gonna summarize something here. He might have a good MLS and be good at what he does. I think there's a personality clash between him and the staff, some of the patrons, some of the people, like, I got a 3-paragraph complaint from the yoga director saying that, yoga is supposed to be this peaceful, mindful, meditative thing. And while they were there, he's on his speakerphone talking loud and interrupting them, and it seems to be a personality clash as to him and, again, the patrons, the staff, some of the people that use the library for specific programs. That's the best I could summarize. Will that change? Can people change their personality? I don't know what to tell you all.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question.
Go ahead.
Michael, have we ever had a good library director here? Have we ever had a good library director here? No matter who it is, there's a problem.
Okay.
It don't matter, as long as I've been here, which ain't been, working on year 13, 14, what? We ain't never had a good library director. Are we ever gonna have one?
I mean, you raised the salary.
But have we
with
ever
ex-
had a good director, is my question.
expectation.
And if you hire another one, get rid of this man and hire another one, is that gonna be a good one? I probably doubt it. There's always issues with this library.
Yeah.
We never had no good director.
Yeah, the odd thing is, I've usually had, I know, I'm not slighting anybody, but I've usually had, a lot of my problems have been with the Carabel branch. I'm getting calls from both branches right now. And I know one is in Commissioner Jones, the other is in Commissioner Massey's. I don't know about the calls and emails you guys been getting, but I've been getting calls from both branches. And again, it's just I think it's more of a personality clash than it is anything else.
Me and Ricky's getting the calls that's in our district. He's threatening them if they don't do stuff, he'll write them up, take their jobs, and we haven't, every director we've had has not been from Franklin County. Everyone we've hired has been away from here.
Well, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that it's a problem because he's not from Franklin
I'm
County.
just saying, we've
Actually,
never hired one here that knows the people and works with them,
There's a personality clash, Commissioner. That's the best I can summarize it for you guys.
But it can't going on with me and Ricky, because we getting hammered every day with this.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I can't speak to the historical depth that you have, Commissioner Parrish. I've only been here for 3 years, but I can tell you, I've not had any issues at the East Point Library until recently, at all. Never, ever. Great library, great function, no problem.
Yeah.
Everything's great. Been in there, got 2 books at the house I checked out myself. In there, so I'm around the library. We've never had an issue until now. That I know unequivocally.
I don't know how to answer your question.
Well, yeah, that's what I want. What y'all want to do?
That's why we're here. There's 5 of us, not 2 of us.
What's in y'all's district?
Yeah. Just know that, if something doesn't change, yeah, we're gonna have to make a decision.
He's on a 90-day probation. If
He
something
is.
don't change, I will make a motion to do something different. Cause me and Ricky's getting every day, just blowing our computers and phones up.
I think we're close to 45 days of the 90 days. I mean, Commissioners, I will meet with him again, renew some of the issues I told him that he needs to work on. That's the best I can do right now, Commissioners. I mean,
That's good.
as your county coordinator,
That's good. The lady hired him, he got her. He got with her.
What you do is, Michael, yes, talk to the man, tell him we getting complaints. And let us keep us on this time,
Yeah,
and
I think
go
the
from there.
first week in January would be 60 days, November, December.
Okay.
It was November, I think it's November he started, November 4th or something like that. I'll have to go look at my records and see. And
I believe
And
that's accurate.
maybe you might wanna pull the library people in here, they the one who had, tell them to be the next meeting.
like, okay,
Yeah, there you go. Him and Kate needs to be here at the next meeting.
Yeah, let him know the time we spent on this. We're concerned.
Yeah.
Cause it can't keep going with me and Ricky.
Right.
I mean, I know y'all not hearing it because it's not in y'all's district.
Well, it's,
I'm like Ricky, the library, he's hammered them girls in East Point the last 2 or 3 weeks hard.
I would take it a step further, Commissioner Massey, because it's not really about us, but it's about the library period, because there are
Right.
patrons there, there are people there, they're trying to use the services, so that's not gonna work. If it's bad enough that somebody's thinking they need to complain to, or call or email a county commissioner about it, then it's outside the scope of a public library. So I'll leave it at that.
Exactly, it's about the patrons, he's hammering them.
Well, Michael, you have a come to Jesus with him and things don't pick up,
oh,
tell him he'll have to come to the commission.
okay. Thought you were gonna tell me I needed more prayer warriors for this too.
Something like that.
All right,
You don't need no prayer warriors because he's fixed to take him a ride.
Mr. Chairman,
Don't do that, don't do that.
Mr. Chairman, on this issue, I know that Mr. Marone's been working with the county's longtime outside counsel on labor law-related matters. My recommendation, if Mike hasn't gone back to him with this matter, he goes back and consults with him at this point in time, and then we'll see where things develop from there. But I think he does need to consult with your outside labor law attorney first before we go any further, okay?
I will.
Okay,
That
put
would be good.
put that in there too, Michael.
So I would like to put that in the form of a motion, but I also want to make sure that motion doesn't push us past the 90-day time period.
Okay.
Hearing back from him.
Good point.
I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jones,
Second.
second by Commissioner Burke. All right, any more discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, that pass unanimous.
Commissioner, we have nothing else for me. Merry Christmas to y'all.
Christmas.
Yeah, you
Happy
too.
New Year. It's not like I won't talk to you between now and then, but officially I'll just.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, it's time for that,
Yes.
public,
Mike, you handle that.
public hearing.
Yes, sir. All right, good morning, Commissioners. This is the first of 2 public hearings on a proposed amendment to the St. George Island Overlay Ordinance. The hearing will take place in 2 components. You will, Mr. Chairman, based on the agenda that's being handed out, the first step would be for you to recess the meeting of the County Commission and then reconvene in your setting as the local planning agency. As a local planning agency, what you're going to be considering in this public setting is an ordinance with the following caption. An ordinance of Franklin County, Florida, amending the St. George Island Corridor Overlay District by removing the prohibition against single-family residential uses on the first floor for property located within a 2,100-foot radius of the center point of the intersection of Franklin Boulevard and Gulf Beach Drive on St. George Island, Florida, as described in Plat Book 2, page 7, Franklin County, Florida, excluding the area east of the east boundary of Third Street East and west of the west boundary of Third Street West, providing for exemptions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. Before we get started, just to sort of lay the summary of the groundwork, in February of 2018, the board adopted a corridor district on St. George Island, which had a number of provisions concerning development restrictions, development standards, things of that nature. And then as things moved forward, it became apparent that one of the items in that corridor district was being reported as creating problems for certain property owners within that overlay district. Specifically, I'm referring to what I will refer to as a C4 residential property. Your C4 zoning district traditionally, historically, has provided for a mixed-use development. You can either have a purely residential component, a purely residential use, or a mixed use of commercial and residential. And what had been happening on the island that the board had been receiving some public complaint about is that within that business district of the island, you know, based on market forces, based on, I guess, a number of factors, people were, instead of building commercial businesses, they were essentially having a purely residential component. And that is what you have subsequent to the adoption of the overlay, which then imposed a requirement mandating commercial use on the first floor of C4 property. You then had approximately 65 or 70 of these C4 residential units within the district who came to the county planner initially, and eventually the concerns reached my office. And the concern is they wanted to be able to rebuild their property as a purely C4 residential use. In part, there were concerns, I'm sure, that are economic. Other concerns they had is there are certain lots within the overlay district which cannot necessarily meet your parking standards if you have to have both a commercial business on the first floor and then a residential use on the second floor and above. And so the board directed me earlier this year to schedule a public hearing to consider this matter, which is how we arrived here today. One of the issues that you probably have heard, if not all of you have heard, is that the way the ordinance has been advertised, it includes not only the C4 residential properties, it also would include the C4 vacant lots that have not yet been constructed. And so that is I guess the summary of how we got to where we are now. You're in a procedural position to conduct this meeting as your local planning agency. But before we get started, are there any questions from any of the board members on how we should proceed with this proposed adoption of an amendment to the ordinance?
Any questions, Board?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Attorney Schuler, I understand what's going on, and I know about the unintended consequence, because I was the one that put in the motion to make the C4 on the island to be true C4.
Yes, sir.
I would ask, this would be my question, is it not possible for us to take care of the immediate need, to grandfather in all the existing residences in that district, and then at some point in the future, if we need to address something, because the parking thing that we're discussing is based on potentiality. There's not a plan being submitted for each of those lots, you know, so I understand the overall arching thing to it, but based on the fact that the lots are vacant, I think we as a board should be able to address that at a later date and take care of the existing problem, and that it come up from Hurricane Michael, commissioners. If one of the houses, so let's say the Skinny Minis, y'all know what I'm talking about, if they would have been destroyed during Hurricane Michael, under this overlay, they would not have been able to have rebuilt. They would have had to build a commercial business. So that would be my question. Can we not proceed in that direction?
Commissioner Jones, yes, the board has the flexibility of either limiting this draft that I've presented to you. You can limit that just to the existing C4 developed properties that have a purely residential component and reserve. I did a count recently, there are approximately 65 vacant C4 lots that do have a potential of being impacted. So yes, those potential future, the development of those C4 vacant lots can be reserved and put off into a different date into the future. and just limit this ordinance to the existing C4 residential properties. Absolutely.
I wasn't trying to ask a question to bypass what we're doing today. I just want to give input as a commissioner of that district.
Yes, sir. Well, that's a very valid question. And are there any other questions from the board members before we proceed?
Any question, any other board member got any question?
Mr. Chairman, if there are no other questions, then you would recess the meeting of the county commission and then reconvene and open this meeting as the local planning agency.
Okay. The Board of County Commission is in recess. The meeting of the county commission acting as a local planning agent is convened.
Mr. Chairman, I have read the caption of the proposed ordinance for the board and the public. At this time, it would be appropriate for you to call for any public comment which may be made.
There public comment?
Mason Bean, St. George Island. Now, I know this commission has great intentions, but the way this ordinance was initially thought of was that the existing buildings would be grandfathered in, and you're right, Commissioner Jones, if they were destroyed, they could rebuild that structure. The way this amendment is written, to my understanding, is that now you're opening up the floodgates that all the commercial lots could allow a residential property. There are some, in the overlay, there are some incentives. For instance, the Fickling building is a great example. I think there's 6 lots there and they've got 8 units. But when you have a commercial building, there's a plan for stormwater and parking and signage and access, and there's safeguards built in. And when you allow a floodwater of shotgun homes to take over our commercial, you've ruined our commercial district, and you've glutted the residential market. I hope you will share with my vision of 5 years, 10 years from now, that St. George Island could have a commercial area, it could have a village, it could have a downtown. And as this is written, I think we're waiving that and handcuffing us. So I hope you'll deny this, and I hope we'll fix it, and let's get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment?
Angela Troy. I own a lot. Right now I have a warehouse on that lot. In the future, I might want to put a home on it. It's on the bay. There are houses surrounding that. It is one lot. I fit into the category where I cannot put commercial below and a home above because there would be no parking. That's the one main issue. So I'm hoping that maybe something can be said, because as it was always known in the past, the lots running along the bay and the lots running around the beach were the prime lots. Those are already have majority homes, and maybe something can be added into that to say those can remain homes, and maybe the center of the island can retain its commercial district feel.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jim Waddell, 2015 Center Point Boulevard, Tallahassee, Florida. I represent Roger Crawford and his wife Patty, who have a personal residence at 112 Gorey Drive. So happens to be one of the 25-foot lot in the C4, also within the overlay district. It's a Gulf front home. Mr. Crawford asked me to review the particular requirements of the overlay district, and have been involved representing him as this issue has moves toward today's action or today's hearing. There are a number of things in the overlay district that are problematic for an existing homeowner within the district, and parking is one of them. Not just the parking for the residence itself, but if there's a commercial component in that building, then there are other state and federal requirements for parking that are imposed, particularly accessibility. handicap parking, an accessible route for those handicapped folks to enter the building. It's my opinion it'd be near impossible for a single residential lot to provide both parking for the residents and accessible parking if there's a commercial component. Many times, and in my experience in representing other clients in the district, and I've done probably a half a dozen commercial developments in the area that we're talking about, the issue of what you do with your wastewater is a paramount concern. Mr. Crawford's residence is served by a remote drain field. A number of those units are on a community drain field system. Those requirements are regulated by the Department of Health. So expanding the capacity of that to support a commercial component would be nearly impossible, and for certain require collaboration amongst multiple property owners to provide that capacity. Waste storage. The overlay district has a 20-foot setback requirement for waste receptacles. That also is problematic. In as much as Mr. Crawford's and maybe a number of other homes in the overlay district would bear the same or similar impossibility of meeting the standards, if their owners were required to rebuild, it's completely appropriate to exempt or grandfather my client and possibly these other existing homes from the standards imposed by the district. I think grandfathering or the blanket exemption, particularly for the existing homes, is the level of assurance that my client is seeking. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dan Ingram Rule. I basically have lived in Florida. I should say my family, since the early 1800s, we lived all over the state of Florida. We've lived in Tallahassee, Jacksonville, so forth. My parents came up here in the mid-70s. We enjoyed it. You had the oyster industry and everything else. They stayed here, lived on the island until basically they got to the point that they needed to have certain medical care and so forth, so they moved to Watkinsville, Georgia. At that point in time, I live right now in the Fort Myers, Naples area. We went through some of the same things that you're now doing it on St. George Island, and that is that you're making plans for what's going to benefit our children and future generations. I happened to go and decide that Fifth Avenue, basically in downtown Naples, was a good place to go. At the point that we started, basically you could have taken a bowling ball and rolled it down the street and not hit anybody. And one of the things that they did is they went and implemented a plan. And they did just what we have here, a mixed-use plan. And one of the reasons that you don't want to take the commercial and basically convert it to residential, you only get a return one time on a residential. At some point, a lot of these lots out here on St. George Island are going to be built and occupied by full-time residents. Okay, they pay their annual taxes every year. If you have a vibrant business district, as you can see here in Apalachicola, you are going to generate the property taxes. You're also going to generate the personal, tangible, and intangible taxes. You also are going to create jobs. You know, I developed a 45,000 square foot building on Fifth Avenue. I have retail restaurants first floor, I have offices second floor, and I have transient lodging third floor, luxury units. our taxes have basically gone up from, I should say, have increased 500%. Our sales taxes, are well over, close to $1 million a year. This is just in my building alone. And we have probably about 100 employees there. And that's what we're looking at with the business district, is not just to handle the transients, but to create jobs for your locals. I'm talking about people that just work there. Well, you also have the plumbers that work there, the air conditioning people, the painters, all the way around. It does that. And you can't go and hamstring a place and not provide for this. I hear the comments that, well, gee whiz, it's who pays the money. Well, down where I am, you have Sanibel and Naples. Well, by them paying those extra taxes, they have money to go to other places. They can go into the other areas. And I think that's, from a long-term standpoint, that's what we need to be thinking about. How do we go and offset the fact that we lost the water, when Georgia took all the water supply and hurt the oyster industry? We need to build the right foundation. I'm not a proponent to have high rises. I do not like them. But you have to move with the flow of what's going to happen. And you need to set the precedent so that we have the building blocks to develop the inner core the way it should be.
3:45, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, time up, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Morning, Marilyn Bean, St. George Island. At the last public hearing that I attended, when Cheryl Sanders made the motion for no new residences in the commercial area, she was very clear that it was no new permits and did not affect the existing homes, and they would just be grandfathered in. That was just never an issue. So I'm totally in agreement with that, but I think we've just got to be careful in planning for the future of our commercial. St. George is commercial from 3rd Street to 3rd Street, and that's it. And in the future, we'll need more businesses, offices, retail, and we just need to keep our commercial area zoned for commercial with any new construction.
I'm Rose Dry from St. George Island, and I have a question for the county attorney, if I may. We're referring to the existing homes as being grandfathered in. Doesn't that still mean that they are now a non-conforming use and would be subject to all of the rules of a non-conforming use?
If they are grandfathered in and accepted from the ordinance, then if they are destroyed by more than 50%, they would be able to rebuild as a purely residential function.
Okay, so both elements would be in the proposed change then?
I'm not
Both
sure.
grandfathering in and having an exception for that property?
I think they're one and the same, yes, ma'am.
Okay, grandfathered in is not a non-conforming use?
They will be allowed as basically a non-conforming use, which is what they are now. I mean, they're presently a non-conforming use, and if they are presently destroyed by 50% or more, as the ordinance reads now, they would have to rebuild with commercial on the ground floor and residential on the
Right.
second and above floor.
Okay.
What's being proposed and discussed is how to deal with that. It may be that they are not exempted. It may be that if they're destroyed by 50% or more, then they have to comply with the current ordinance. If what is ultimately passed at the second public hearing is what's been discussed here, then what I refer to as the existing C4 residential properties would then be allowed to rebuild with a purely residential component. So whether you want to call it grandfathering or non-conforming, I don't think it would be non-conforming if the ordinance is amended to allow for it.
All right. That would be good, because we're talking about over 50 existing single-family residences.
Yes, ma'am. When we say over, I'm told closer to 65 to almost 70 is what I'm
Right.
told. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. What happened? Oh, you're trying to pull this one up? Commissioners, where Mr. Morone is we had back in July when the board authorized the public hearing that we're having now, there was a map that Mr. Carrington had prepared, a large map, and this is a small version of it that shows the various C4 residential properties within the business district, and we're trying to get that displayed now for the benefit of the board and the public. But there are approximately, as was just discussed, say 65 of these C4 residential properties within the business district that you would now be considering potentially grandfathering in and allowing them to rebuild as a purely residential use in the event they are destroyed by more than 50%. There are also approximately 65 or so, 60 to 65 of the vacant C4 properties within the business district that would have these potential parking issues that we're talking about potentially just saving, not dealing with that now, but saving that for as an issue to be developed or a solution developed at a future time. But it's a, potentially it is a fairly large issue, and the reason I had drafted the ordinance as I did today was so you would have an opportunity, one, to clarify this discussion between the number of units that would be grandfathered and then the number of potential vacant lots that there may be future issues that have to be dealt with.
Excuse me, Michael, this may be what you're looking for.
Oh, we've got it, yes, sir. But yes, thank you, that may be clear. Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Okay. Yeah, I think we're still in public comment, Commissioner, or Mr. Chairman.
Is there any more public comments? It's the time for y'all to talk. Public comment. Public comment. Okay, look like we through with public comment.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further public comment, now would be the time on the agenda for the board to have a discussion among yourselves as the local planning agency.
Pleasure of the board. Discussion on the board.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just want to make sure that everybody's understanding exactly what I'm saying here today. I'm 100% for doing our best to create, through what we've done through this ordinance, a more vibrant future for the business district on the island. I know that it's not going to be perfect for everybody, but I think if we as this board can move forward and grandfather in those residences that were already in existence in this district before this act of the government that we created, and move forward and give space for there to be more businesses on the island and not just purely residential. There's miles of land there and there's plenty of space for houses. A lot of it's occupied, but that's what it is. I will say, as we discuss other things, and there's going to be more coming in the future, we had some other discussions today, and I don't want to, but I can tell you, business is going to exist. It's got to have somewhere to be. And so that's my intent. And when we first started talking about this overlay district, was to give business somewhere to be.
You right. Is the parking all right?
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. That's just something I have to address. It's just hard to, Mr. Chairman, it's just hard to address potential parking when you don't know what the, you know what I mean? If they're asking for a 50 by 50 building or a 100 by 50 building, you know what I mean? It's hard to address potential when you don't know what the plans are.
Yeah, as you can, and I'm not sure.
How many's living in their businesses, Ricky?
Oh, there we go.
Right now,
Right along
I don't
this
think it's too
area.
many. He's got some stuff he's wanting to tell us about.
The lots that have the parking problem are these lots, not on this, I'm sorry, on this side of the road, because those are the 25-foot lots that they don't front on both a public road and have an alley. I've spoken to your county planner, and when you have these 25-foot lots, for example, the ones that are in the middle, say up in this area. They have an alley and a public road, so they're able to at least meet some minimum parking standards, but there are approximately 60-ish lots here and along this area and along this area that they don't front on both a public road and an alley, so they have a hard time trying to meet the 3 minimum parking spaces that would be required for a mixed-use development. It's the minimum parking you would have for an individual lot that has that mixed-use component. You have to have a minimum of 2 parking spaces for a residence, and for every 200 square feet of commercial, you have to have 1 parking space. So when you're dealing with, let's say, someone that wants to maximize, as they did, say, along the Skinny Minis, where you have 1 unit per lot, where they're trying to maximize their development potential, the parking is going to be a problem for those areas, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a problem that's addressed right now. There's certainly nothing inappropriate about identifying the known problem with the existing C4 residential properties, dealing with that issue now, and then, and I've already spoken to Mr. Carrington and asked him to begin a process of seeing, you know, how can he brainstorm a potential solution or a path forward for these other lots that are zone C4 but are going to have these parking problems. He doesn't have an answer for that question right now, but again, there's certainly nothing that says you have to solve the entire business district issues in one setting. It can always be broken up and deal with one issue now and then deal with the other issues we move forward into the future. But what you're looking at with the map, you have the colors yellow and blue. In the bottom left-hand corner, that is, I understand, the Villas of St. George. That is not, I believe, a C4 zone property. I think that was developed under a different development order from the county, or at least that's the way it's been explained to me. So when we're talking about grandfathering in C4 residential properties, unless there's some different direction from the board, I'm not envisioning that there would be a grandfathering, so to speak, for the Villas of St. George. What you're looking at are those blue areas, which on Mr. Carrington's map, I believe, are all of the C4 residential properties that are presently in the business district of the island. In the middle of the right-hand side, you'll see there's a portion of the block that is colored yellow but has 2 blue lines in it. That is a property which is zone C4, but there was basically a lot reconfiguration done a few years ago. They authorized, I don't remember the exact density, it could have been 8 units, let's just say there were 8 of the C4 residential properties, but there were, the 2 blue lines represent the 2 that were actually built. So in terms of grandfathering, it would, I believe, include all of the items shown, all of the lots, excuse me, shown in blue on this map, including in the upper right-hand corner, the 1 block that has the 2 blue lines marked with the yellow portion of the block. So if you're moving towards an idea of this is what we're going to grandfather and create an exemption in the overlay district to allow them to rebuild as C4 residential with purely residential and no commercial component, those are the lots that you would be considering.
What about the ones that aren't colored at all? How do we categorize those?
Well, the ones that are not colored at all, some of that is C2, some of that is C4. And for example, up here in this area, that's C4. Under the current proposal, those that are not colored would have to be rebuilt with, or whenever they submit a site plan, there would have to be commercial on the ground floor and residential up top under the current ordinance.
It's your baby, Commissioner Jones.
Well, we can't take a vote today, Commissioner.
I know.
But Mr. Chairman, again, this is still part of your meeting as the local planning agency. You're at the portion of the agenda where you would discuss this among yourselves. If you have finished the discussion among yourselves, then you would recess, you would close the meeting of the local planning agency, reconvene the meeting of the county commission, and then you would conduct your second public hearing. But at neither of these will you take a vote one way or the other on the ordinance. The vote would be preserved for your second public hearing.
where the Skinny Minis is at on the bay. That used to be commercial property back years ago. Was you in here when they built them?
Those were all commercial. They were C2 properties that were rezoned to C4 along the bay, and then they were rezoned for the purpose of constructing the C4 residences that I've described here. And again, that C4 residence means it's a commercially zoned C4 property, but it has a purely residential component, which is, prior to the overlay, that's how the C4 district was implemented. It was either a pure commercial use, a pure residential use, or a mixed use, mixing commercial and residential. It's just the way the market forces had worked up until recently. There was really not much in the way of a true mixed use. I think maybe Franklin one, there was some mention of that earlier. I think that's one of the true mixed uses where they have commercial on the ground floor and the residential uses above. But for the most part, it's been purely residential uses made within that commercial district, which is what has led people in the community to come forward and request that the board protect that business district.
Mr. Chairman? If you actually wanted to do a true commercial venture with a resident, you almost need 2 lots to do that. To provide for your septic tank, your aerobic system, parking. I mean, you almost need 2 of these lots because it's so skinny. But these lots were platted when? Many years ago?
That, I don't know the exact date, Commissioner. It was probably in the late 50s, early 60s, most likely, but I could pull the plat and find out.
But I mean, that's just one thing that prohibits from,
It's too small.
as I remember when I was on the Planning and Zoning Board many years ago, this was the issue that we dealt with in the downtown section, or downtown commercial section of St. George Island. And these were some of the issues that was brought up, is they're so, and we didn't plat them, or I didn't plat those lots, but anyways, they're so skinny that you don't have room to actually put a building on them and provide parking for a commercial venture, and that makes it very tough. You almost need multiple lots configured together in order to provide for all the stipulations to do a real true commercial. And that's the reason you have the issues with the parking, is because the lots are so small, it's hard. And that's basically how some of these Skinny Minis got to where they are, because that's basically all they could do with 1 lot. You could not actually do a true commercial venture and be able to provide for the aerobic system and the parking and the setbacks and everything else that entails. Which leads us to the issue that we're dealing with today as far as residential overtaking a commercial district on St. George Island. And the lots are so expensive to acquire, the multiple lots that you need really makes it difficult to do a true commercial venture in that area. Some have been able to accomplish that, but most of them have multiple lots that were able to do that.
Commissioner Byrd?
So, Commissioner Parrish, that's helped me clarify a good bit here. The discussion here is, the intention is to consider restoring the use of this property the way the original buyer intended it to be when it was bought. Is that the idea here?
Yes, so Commissioner, I think what you're referring to is whenever these individuals receive the rezoning from C2 to C4, and then the approval to build their, essentially the purely residential use of that property, I think that's what you're referring to. And yes, right, that is, I believe, the intent of the comments from Commissioner Jones earlier.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I guess we'll go back to the regular meeting now.
Yes, we'll close the meeting of the local planning agency and then reconvene the meeting of the county commission and take public comment.
Franklin County Board of County Commissioners closing this meeting and going back to the regular meeting.
All right, Mr. Chairman, this is a bit of a departure from your usual procedure because you have just conducted a meeting as the LPA. You're now going to conduct a second public hearing as the county commission. So just for purposes of the record, I'll read the caption of the ordinance again. This is the public hearing by the Franklin County Board of County Commissioners on the first reading of an ordinance of Franklin County, Florida, amending the St. George Island Corridor Overlay District by removing the prohibition against single-family residential lots on the first floor of property located within a 2,100-foot radius of the center point of the intersection of Franklin Boulevard and Gulf Beach Drive on St. George Island, Florida, as described in Plat Book 2, page 7, Franklin County, Florida, excluding the area east of the east boundary of 3rd Street East and west of the west boundary of 3rd Street West, providing for exemptions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. So at this time, it would be appropriate to take any further public comment if there is any.
Okay. Public comment, back in that.
I'm sure I should have done this earlier, but Angela Troy, I can give you a prime example, if I may, on the board. The lots that are on the bay side, you have 4 that are blue, 2 that are not. Oh my gosh. Oh, how are you supposed to use this? Right there, that one lot. You see the 4 to the blue, those are 4 homes that I built. I have the other 2 lots in white next to it. I have one of them now. We sold the other one. I have one. I have a warehouse on that lot, the 2 white ones, so I have the one that's to the east. I may in the future want to build a home on that. I have 1 lot. I can put 1 home on it if I wanted to and meet the septic and the setbacks, but I cannot do it if I must put commercial on the below. I can't even put commercial on the below because you couldn't build anything much more than a 500 square foot building, and even then, your setbacks are such that the use would not be worthwhile. I do own a business right there on those 2 white lots. 2 lots, 1 business, because I couldn't do anything else to make a decent sized business except for using 2 lots to meet the setback. My business on those lots is set back 50 feet. I am the furthest business setback on Gulf Beach Drive. Nobody is back that far in order to meet the parking requirements that we have. So I am a prime example of the 1 lot that I will no longer be able to make any use of, so to speak. In that, if you make this overlay and don't grandfather in, as I mentioned earlier, the lots on the bay side and the lots on the beach side, which are mostly home anyway, have always had an understanding that those were prime because your view is there that residential could be made. So I'm suggesting that maybe a change could be added for that, to allow those lots where most of the lots are, because there is nothing behind us, so we can't do anything. There's the water. So we only have the setback on the front road. So we can't, things have to be where they are for us to be able to use that lot.
Public comment. Public comments.
This is a general question.
You have to come forward.
Come forward, sir. and-
If you wait till you get to the mic, please, sir. Thank you.
You keep bringing up the questions about, all the, what I call, the things that had to be done to the lot and so forth like this. Our concern is, a 25-foot lot, well, maybe you do 50 feet. That's what they did, on some of these here, where they consolidated and build a bigger place. But I think a lot of this is, what we're talking about is how do we implement it? I understand we have problems now with certain situations, but what we're doing is for the future. And you can resolve this. You could put parking underneath it. I'm not saying that's what you do. You do your sub-ground underneath drainage. At this point, I agree. Economically, it doesn't make any sense to do that. But at some point in time, it may. And so just because the parking issue is an issue in any city, anywhere, but it can be overcome. And I think we need to just preserve what we have so that we have that opportunity to, face that problem when it occurs. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Public comments? Public comment. Oh, there you go.
Mason Bean again. I think Angela Troy brought up a good point. The same thing is true of that one single beachfront lot in Block 10 there. When it's sandwiched in between existing skinny minis, you know, those would be great candidates to continue the residential use. The whole intent is just your right to preserve it. Now, you're talking about some of these lots are C4 and the others are C2. In the C2, residential was a prohibited use. I can't emphasize that enough. And all that's going to rezone. Once you started this C4 zoning, everybody's going to rezone it. So, I mean, that's the threat. So I hope that we can compromise that maybe along the water is, because that is all water, they're allowed to build a residence. But please, let us keep our downtown future. Thanks.
Public comments?
Paul Rigglemeyer, St. George Island. I'd like to echo Mason's idea for a compromise, allowing C4 along the water, both Bay and Gulf, and keep the rest of it commercial. We need a commercial district. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if there is no further public comment, again, this is the time on the agenda for the board to have any further discussion among itself. If there is no further discussion by the board, you will not be voting at today's public hearing. That will be reserved until the second public hearing. I am requesting, as you see on the agenda, a request from the board that you do take action authorizing that the second public hearing occur at a time prior to 5 p.m. Absent such an action by the board, the second hearing would be held after 5 p.m. at some time approved by the board.
Okay. Discussion.
I have a question for the lawyer. The lady there talking about her property she's got, wants to build a house in between it. How, I guess years ago they had it where she could build a house there, or?
Well, the C4 zone properties prior to February of 2018 really did not have necessarily the same parking questions, because as site plans were being submitted, which is sort of what Commissioner Jones is alluding to this morning, is as those site plans were submitted, people were making the economic decision to have purely residential uses, and so they were able to meet the parking requirements for a residence, which is 2. And so they were able to then build, as we've seen, the skinny minis on the island. They've had, I think there was a mention of a common drain field. I mean, they've come up with some creative ways, and this board has assisted them by providing, access across your right-of-ways with drain fields and things of that nature. So when the overlay district was adopted in February of 2018, it required and mandated the commercial component on the first floor of C4 zone properties, which meant that you then were changing the prior dynamic for the parking component. There would have to be a minimum of at least 2 parking spaces for the residents, and then for every 200 square feet of commercial development, you would have to have 1 parking space. So there was a mention, you need a minimum of 500 square feet, I think was one of the public comments. Well, that's a little over 2 parking spaces, 2.5 parking spaces for the commercial plus 2 for the residential component above, so that's 4.5 parking spaces. And for those units that are fronting, for example, in this area up here, that although that's a nice road line shown on a map, it's in the middle of a marsh, you'll never get a road there. So effectively their access is here, and they simply, because they only have a lot fronting on one public roadway, in this case I think an alley, they can't meet the parking requirements because they don't have 2 right-of-ways that they can try and make use of. I mean, there are some communities that don't even let you use the right-of-way for your parking calculation. It all has to be on site. So this board has been I think, very generous in trying to encourage development by allowing, you know, the use of right-of-ways and things of that nature. At least that's what I'm inferring from the planner's comments to me earlier. But the reason the parking's a problem now is because the ordinance changed. And so now we're slowly working our way, in this case, through, well, if we're not going to address the entire district, then we're going to, perhaps the boards will limit itself just to solving, so to speak, the issue for the C4 residences and saving for a future date those other vacant C4 properties.
I understand, okay.
But
I
that's the
understand
reason
what
it's-
Mason's saying, but I just hate for the lady not to, her lot, the only one lot she's got business, she won't ever do nothing with it. I mean, she's paid taxes on it for years, you know, I understand them wanting a commercial district, I don't blame them, but what would she do with her one lot?
Yeah, well, and since it's a rhetorical question, I mean, there probably are other C4 property owners within the heart of the business district that may or may not ask the same question, but
Yeah.
that's one reason I've asked your planner to begin working on trying to come up with a plan for you to consider, a option that may help solve this. It may be that it's something that we just can't come up with an immediate solution to, other than we'll keep working on it and we'll develop site plans as projects come in. We'll work to try and develop those site plans, and who knows? I mean, there's all sorts of options on the table.
Okay.
There could be variances for hardship because, you know, perhaps the county's regulations are creating the hardship on the parking. I mean, there are things that can be examined.
Let me ask a question.
Yes,
One
sir.
of them like lot that size, how many parking spaces they'll hold?
Commissioner, what the planner is telling me is if you have a single lot, a skinny mini, that is fronting on two public access ways, say fronting on a road and then having an alley in the back, I'm told that those types of lots are not the problematic lots as it relates to parking. It is just those skinny minis, or excuse me, the individual lots, say along this area, and then say this whole row along Gulf Beach Drive. The problem is this is a very wide right-of-way here. There's basically a 20-foot paved parking surface along the north side, but this is all like dunes and vegetation and the bike path. I mean, and I agree with the planner, you don't want the public crossing over those bike paths and crossing over those natural areas in order to provide parking here. So effectively, these are all lots that would be affected. Not all of them are C4, by the way. I mean, some are C2, some are C, most of them are C4, but some are C2. And same thing here in this area. Those are lots that are only fronting along this roadway, because although that road's shown on the map, I mean, it's marsh. You can't include it. I mean, there'll never be a road built through there. So,
According to that up there, it'd be 3 cars, all could park in that one then.
yeah. But would you have one of those single lots fronting on 2 roads? Apparently the parking's not an issue. It's just in those geographic areas where you only are fronting effectively on 1 road that the parking problems are being faced.
You know, I can see the planner making suggestions lot-specific, where it's located relative to access or not, or wetlands, or et cetera. It's interesting.
So they really not, I was thinking about, can you make a parking lot out of them, but they not big enough to make a parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would need to think carefully before we talk about the public providing parking spaces for private development. All right, well, Mr. Chairman, if the board has no further discussion among itself, you've completed public comment, my recommendation is that you close the public hearing and then take up your consideration of my request that you take board action to authorize the second public hearing to be held prior to 5 p.m. So I'm thinking probably the second meeting in January, unless the board has other instructions for me.
Okay, the public comment is over now. I guess. You want me to close this public?
Yes, sir. We close the public hearing.
This public hearing is now closed. We'll open back up to the regular session.
You'll just move to the next item on the agenda, which my suggestion is that the board authorize the second public hearing to occur at a time prior to 5 p.m.
Okay, next on the agenda, we need a discussion on, when will we have the next public hearing on it?
I make a motion that we do it the second meeting in January at 10 o'clock.
Second meeting in January. I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jones,
Second,
second by Commissioner Burke.
and that would be
To have
January
this public-
21st.
We'll have the public hearing at the second meeting in January. What time?
10 o'clock.
Huh?
10
So we'll
o'clock.
do it after 5?
He said we have to do it.
Prior to 5.
Oh, okay.
10 o'clock is reserved for your Board of Adjustments, so I say 10:30 or I'll let you.
11 o'clock, is that
11
okay,
o'clock.
Commissioner Jones?
That's fine, 11 o'clock. I just didn't want to do it at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, okay.
Prior to 5.
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock.
Okay.
I changed my motion to 11 o'clock.
Okay, well, we'll have, okay, the time been set to 11 o'clock on the second meeting in January. Any more discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimously.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I have just a couple of items to go over with the board for board action. One is I need board authorization for the chairman to sign the closing statement where the county purchased the right-of-way from Mr. Steve Brown at Alligator Point. We've had the closing, but I still need the chairman's signature on the settlement statement, so if I can get board approval for that.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish, second by Commissioner Jones. Any more discussion? That's the one you were working on, Commissioner Boat?
Yes, I was, yeah.
Okay, good job. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passed unanimous.
Now that, just to clarify for the record, this is the right-of-way down near Allen Drive at the, providing some alternative access
Yeah.
to the east of the intersection you may be thinking of, Mr. Chairman. I know that at one point Commissioner Bolt and myself were working, trying to get some property from another landowner right there at the old KOA to soften that turn. This is not that property.
Oh, it ain't that one? Oh, I thought,
No, that's what I thought you meant. No, I wish, but no, this is further
I
to
know
the
he
east of
was,
it.
Stay tuned on that one.
yeah,
Yeah, there's still
was a
some
hard,
good folks working on that.
he a hard driver.
Commissioners, the next item is a housekeeping on your Hurricane Housing Recovery Program contract that you approved at the last board meeting. There was some discussion concerning how to make sure that the contract provider, Lori Schweitzer, was paid according to the 15% that's allowed under the contract. Part of the issue has been that the state in this grant has mixed in administrative costs such as surveys and recording fees and setup costs with the actual, basically the salary to be paid to the contract worker, Lori Schweitzer. So the suggestion has been that she would receive the entire 15%, and out of that 15%, she would be responsible to make sure that all of the costs are paid. She will then provide documentation to the finance office showing through invoices and paid checks that these costs have been incurred and paid for out of the grant. The county will not be responsible for the payment of any of the costs for the Hurricane Housing Recovery Program. All those expenses would come out of the monies paid to the contract provider, Ms. Schweitzer. That 15% is roughly $185,000. It will be paid out in equal shares, 34 payments, beginning September the 1st. She's already been providing contract services, but we would also need as part of this motion to approve what I've just described to you, that the contract itself will be retroactive to September the 1st of 2019. I think that's okay in this case because the actual contract that we signed with the state is dated July. So we're not having payment for services that occurred prior to the grant with the state.
Pleasure to the board.
So moved.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Masters, second by Commissioner Jones.
And shouldn't Ms. Schweitzer give us a register and accounting of her expenses when she goes through with that?
Yes, so she's going to be providing as part of her invoices to the county finance office. She will provide invoices and paid checks for the payment of those costs.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
And finally, I'm asking for the board's permission to conduct a public hearing for you to consider amending the ordinance which prohibits public parking in your public places overnight. That was an issue that Commissioner Parrish had brought up a couple of meetings ago. There was an ordinance adopted in 2005, but there is a provision in there, essentially an exception for people that are allowed to park in these public places for the purposes of crabbing and floundering. We've had a number of additional parks that have come online into service since 2005, and so what I'm requesting is that you allow me to schedule a public hearing for you to consider some refinement to that provision that would allow an exception for people who are crabbing and floundering, because I think right now the sheriff would probably have some issues with enforcement, because if someone says they're crabbing and floundering, I mean, how are they going to deal with that? So just, again, permission to schedule a public hearing for you to consider a proposed change to the ordinance.
Pledge of the vote.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Parrish, second by Commissioner Master. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that completes my report to you this morning.
All right, anybody got anything else for Mr. Schuler?
I don't have anything for Mr. Schuler, but before we move on to our comments, I do have something, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay. In light of the fact that Ms. Schweitzer is not only doing the regular stuff, but now the Hurricane Michael stuff, I'd like to make a motion that she start appearing to this board, starting in January, at least every other month, with a report and updates, like every other person does reporting to us.
I agree with you, sir. I second that.
Yep.
Okay,
We'll never see her.
I got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Jones, second by Commissioner Master. All right, that sound good.
Mhm.
We never see
Got,
her.
gotta keep, that's what we do, we got to keep in check. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That pass unanimous. Mr. Schuler, Merry Christmas to you and your staff. And,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Merry Christmas to the chairman and the county commission as well.
Merry Christmas to you and everyone up here.
okay. All right, now next will be good time. Commissioner comment.
I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah, very much so. I've certainly enjoyed this year with you guys.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and if you have time Friday night, we're playing the Seahawk basketball team's playing a district game versus Bozeman in East Point at 7 o'clock.
All right. Merry Christmas and
All right.
Happy New Year to Franklin County. Meeting adjourned.